live stream. Now, this was off the back of a webinar which we ran 2 weeks ago, titled, Simon, do you remember the title?
No, can't remember.
Why every board needs a solid connection with their CEO.
Well done, well
Well,
done.
at least you wrote the paper, so you could spit harder than me. 2 weeks is a long
I should
time.
remember.
So on the top right here, we have Linda Carroll with us, CEO of Align Group. Simon Telfer, founder and managing director of Appoint Better Boards. And Lisa Cook, the founder and managing director of Get On Board Australia. So the format of the session is really a free flow. We have a number of questions that were curated from our webinar last week that we just really didn't have time to answer. So here they are. The first question, team, is how many boards monitor CEO performance by getting a 360-degree view of staff evaluations of the CEO? Who wants to tackle that one?
Oh, I'm happy to jump in and start things rolling.
Good on you.
Impossible to try and find statistics on this actual number and trying to discover this. Every board has a different process of performance managing their CEO, and it may be different year to year. I feel like where I come from to answer this, and I'm really interested to hear Linda and Simon's perspective, is it matters less on what others do and matters more about what you're doing for your board and your situation and your CEO and what makes sense now. A huge caveat with any sort of 360-degree review process is to do it right and do it well. And so on that, engage an expert in this type of process so that it doesn't cause undue issues from being poorly conducted, with the feedback being poorly given to the CEO or others. So it's fraught, so get expert help. But really think about whether it's the right thing for your organization and board to be doing at this point in time.
Steve?
Yeah, I agree.
Simon, you have anything on that?
Yeah, I think it's more important that we are clear on what our expectations are, and then making sure we had valid processes to gather data around those. And so from my perspective, most commonly I assist organisations to identify, the results that need to link into the strategy, and then clear behavioural expectations as well that would be linking into the culture or values of the organisation, as well as what the specific job competencies are for the chief executive. So from my perspective, it's much more important that we're clear on those expectations.
Very good. Simon?
A couple of things. When I see, when I'm undertaking board reviews, there's always a question about what is the relationship between the board and the CEO. So I think make sure that any board review incorporates a question about that. And I always have or wherever I can, have the CEO and sometimes the CFO in that population of people. So we've got the chair, all the independent directors, executive directors, and the CEO and the CFO. So that does allow a little bit of that feedback as to what's going well with the board's relationship with the CEO, and vice versa. It allows the CEO to also share that. And then also, when I've seen it done well in organisations, when we talk about 360, it's with the senior management team. So it's done in that sort of executive leadership team review, as opposed to being a whole of company. It probably makes more sense. So just keeping it nicely aligned within that strata of the organisation where people are directly reporting into that individual.
Right. Question here. Does any of the panel have any idea of the percentage, this is going to be a tough one, percentage of CEOs that are internally promoted or externally sourced? Simon, you might have a view on that.
It's really, really tough it's really, really tough. So I'm not even going to stab at that, but I think we did cover, and I'd sort of suggest again, there is that, when you're looking at career pathways and professional development, it is a really good messaging when you can hire within. It obviously de-risks the culture change of a new CEO coming straight into the organisation. So growing within is fantastic. But there are times when you do get an organisation that say, you know what, we do need
Fresh blood.
new ideas, fresh thinking. And I don't mean that as a cliche, but honestly do. And there's sometimes I've seen internal appointments, particularly sometimes in local government organisations, where you think the time was right to actually bring in a new person rather than just recycling people in the executive leadership team. So, I'm having a dollar each way on that.
Very good. Lisa, any comments from you?
Yeah, I think it comes down to circumstances. And I liken, if an organization's in a crisis, maybe let's use Qantas as an example. Is it the best idea to be bringing someone from the inside to the CEO role? It's what they've done. Not quite sure if they had the foresight that it was going to be as messy as it has been in the transition, but in those sort of circumstances, it may have been better to bring someone in from outside who can work through those radical changes that may need to happen, and be that agent of change. And then maybe when they step out, someone from inside can come through and sort of steady the ship and keep it going. That's a really unique example, but those are the sort of things you need to consider bigger picture around at the time of appointment. What are we doing with the CEO?
My preference is certainly to give people from internally a crack at it, a go at it, but also be quite clear on what it is that you require for success in this role, and then invite internal candidates to apply alongside external. And being very aware of the fact that if you're bringing somebody in from outside who's already been a chief executive, then they've got runs on the board. When you're bringing somebody up internally, you need to make sure you put really good coaching support and structure around them, because they presumably haven't been a chief executive in this organisation before. So, you really do. And often they may not have been a chief executive at all before. So you really need to make sure that you have put that support, coaching around them, and ensure they understand what is governance, what is management, and how those two have to work hand in glove together.
Great. The next question, who's the lucky person? The road ahead for organisations is perhaps less predictable. What essential skills are required for CEOs to succeed in the future?
Linda's going to take that one first.
Right. Thank you, Simon. Yeah, so that's the thing. We're living in such uncertain times. The whole landscape is changing so quickly that it means that we really do need to have chief executives that have a high tolerance for ambiguity and who have exceptional visionary leadership skills and really fabulous strategic partnership skills, so that they can work well with their external and internal shareholders, stakeholders, and the like. And some of the other things that I think is critical is business execution and commercial business acumen, depending on what sector you're in. It might be political acumen, but they need to have those networks so that they are always picking up what's happening, how the world is changing, and being able to think strategically about what does that mean for their business and how do we need to, step change on the head of a pin.
Well said.
Yeah. Skills that never go out of fashion, I would say. Linda, from your list. and adding on to that, all I want to say is you want to be discerning enough to know which next shiny object to chase and which ones don't make sense, which ones are irrelevant. But I think that just reinforces all the things you were saying, Linda.
Excellent.
Yeah, I'm not going to add anything else other than that ability to be human with a high EQ and just forming really strong people relationships. Has it ever been the case? Well, maybe you could look back 40, 50 years and say, well, you worked for the same firm and that CEO didn't really need to have that. But the ability to be human, the high EQ, and that, being a person that really enjoys being with other people. I see Gabby's asked a question. I'm not sure if you're seeing that live at the moment. Sean, you might want to pivot to that one.
Just a moment. So Gabby's asked, when is solid connection too close and more of the CEO being friends with the board? This is a disincentive to review the CEO's performance.
It's tough, isn't it? It's really, really tough because you want to have you want that collegiality, you want that open door policy, you want that person in the CEO role looking forward to the board meeting, not sort of having trepidation. You want the board members to come in and think this is going to be a really constructive role with the CEO, and it's not going to be destructive or anything negative like that. But there is that relationship that has to draw that line, that it is a professional relationship, particularly between the chair and that CEO, that there is that, again, that humanness, there is that genuine interest in each other's worlds, but understanding that there are roles there, and that maybe friendship, true friendship can come after the appointment or the engagement, not during it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gabby. Team, how do you handle a board that continues to delve into operational issues during their board meetings, even when the CEO clarifies?
Oh, that's really the chair's responsibility, isn't it?
It is,
If the
isn't it?
chair is leading well, then the chair will hold the board to account at a governance level and actually challenge that sort of behaviour. Yeah.
Yeah. If the chair, counterpoint, Linda, if the
Yeah.
chair is also participating in this operational deep dive, there's
Not a mess.
sort of two other players in this that need to remember that they have a part they can play as well. And one is the CEO, in that they may have to provide that level of leadership, Nelly, to the board to keep that conversation at the right level. But we also can't forget our own roles that we have individually as board members, to make sure that we're not falling into that trap and we're not railroading the conversation down an operational path. We need to keep in mind, what is our role, what is our purpose here, and how can we stay on track and at the right level.
Well said. This is a long one. It's running off my page, so I'll give this a crack. As an NGO of around 40 staff, would you expect a board member to receive detailed pay information weekly for every staff member? The payroll is signed off by the CEO and the finance manager weekly to approve, and the manager signs off timesheets and allowances. That's delving far too deep into things, isn't it?
Look, it depends. If you're in a crisis, it might be something that they're needing to keep a short-term, closer eye on. Beyond that, I can't imagine many other reasons why you'd want to have that sort of depth of oversight.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the person that asked that question already knew the answer to that.
Yeah.
Probably. Now they have their ammunition.
Yeah.
Lisa said.
Yeah.
How significant is a strong intelligence for a CEO? Goes without saying.
Strong intelligence or strong emotional intelligence?
Both.
Both, but I think the question was strong emotional intelligence. So I think that EQ, and you mentioned this before, Simon, 20 years ago, people thought it was IQ that actually made the difference between success as a leader or a chief executive. But now we know it's the EQ that actually is a real determinant of outstanding performance.
Yeah, and it was an emotional intelligence question, emotionally intelligent question, but it did say emotional intelligence. And I think that when you have a CEO that feels that they need to be the most intelligent person in the room, that sense of insecurity and sort of dominance doesn't lend itself. I think once upon a time, again, we're harking back once upon a time that you felt the need to, but it's having confidence in saying that my role isn't to be the subject matter expert and to have the highest degree of intelligence on absolutely everything. Emotional intelligence, yes, but cerebral intelligence, less so. I might get a job as a CEO.
Go for it, Simon.
How do you get a CEO or a board member to realize it's time to go, and what if they still don't get the message?
It's all about the conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, the tough conversation.
But also whether the foundation documents make it clear. You really should have tenure clear when you appoint people to the board. How long are they there for? How many years? What each term is? To make it absolutely clear, so we don't have people who stick around and stay in that situation.
But what would you do? What would you do if they didn't move
If
on?
you didn't have tenure and they didn't want to move on, then
Yeah.
again, I see it as a role for the chair.
Chair.
Hopefully it wasn't the chair that was actually staying on when they shouldn't.
Mm.
But it is the role of the chair to actually have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, coming back to yourself, like be conscious of your role and your participation and the value you're adding as a board member on any board, and pick up the signs that it may be time to go. You're either disagreeing with everything, you're probably talking and no one's responding, your ideas seem to fall flat and no one engages with them. These could all be signs that maybe it is time to find greener pasture where you're better valued and where you can contribute more.
Well said.
And you can, and don't forget, you can use like an independent person to come in and do a board review as the catalyst for that conversation. If you haven't built up that relationship, the chair, that's why I always feel when I'm chairing, you're taking interest in people, you're giving them wins, you're making sure they're being heard and stuff like that. And that's all best practice, but it's also so you build up those credits, and then sometimes you have to cash in those credits. And it's very hard doing it from a nil balance coming in, because it feels very confrontational. If you can have that, if you built that relationship and saying, hey, have a coffee, we need to have a chat. If you haven't got that either relationship or haven't built up those credits, then using an external review, as I said, to not give the answer to that, it might hint towards that, but at least bring it to a bit of a head, or allow the review of the review in the boardroom to be the entree into having a question, and then you can take that offline with the individual.
Excellent. Okay, this is a bit long one as well. How do you find out as a board member whether the CEO represents the board's direction accurately, or filters activities and strategies out that the CEO might not believe in?
Yeah. So I think that's everyone's fear who's on a board.
It's an interesting one, isn't it, Lisa?
Yeah. I think Simon had a good answer to this during the live webinar, but Linda, I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Well, look, I'll just jump in and say, when I was chair, after every board meeting, I used to do a short video that was sent out to all staff. And this was an infrastructure company. So it was, it wasn't necessarily people sitting behind a desk. It was guys out there on the roads and just having a very brief 3 to 5 minute chat about what the board talked about, what were some of the decisions, what's top of mind of the board at the moment, as a way to actually ensure that they're getting the message from us, and also doing regular walkabouts and chatting to the people.
That's a great idea.
The site visits. Okay, sorry, Lisa, you go.
No, you go, Simon.
Well, I think I'm not sure if I said this last time. 2 weeks is a long time, Lisa. I think there's a direct line between the board and the CFO, or a strong dotted line. So I don't think everything needs to be filtered through the CEO. And if your CEO is reluctant, the sort of individual that's reluctant to allow other senior executives into the boardroom to present, or always wants to be the filter or the conduit for any conversation between the board and the management team, then that strikes me as just a little bit of a yellow flag there that I would be wanting to explore a little bit. Linda's definitely, when you go on those site health and safety site visits and stuff like that, it does allow you to get a one-on-one discourse with an individual, and you can drop in sort of questions here that can help you understand, has that key messaging filtered down? Has it been diluted, or has it just not gone through? So there are, those are some of the yellow flags I would be looking for.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost through them, so let's get on. What does the CEO do if you have a board that don't properly understand the business?
Yeah, it's a worry, and it's something that needs to be rectified ASAP. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to make well-informed decisions if you don't know how the organization runs or any of the nuances of it. Firstly, make sure that there's an induction program that every board member goes through. And it may be the case that it's time for it to be revived or created, and for every board member, regardless of how long they've been involved, to go through that process anyway. Other than that, when information is given to board members, and I think this is important to consider for most boards, even if you do have an induction program, is nearly to assume that your board members have zero knowledge. And you need to, in each of the reports and information and decisions, discussions that you're having, is to go through this little bit of an education piece and really just contextualizing and adequately framing the matter or the issue or the decision or the discussion so that a meaningful conversation can take place. So you have to play this educational role in whatever you do, and always keep in mind that you have the tyranny of knowledge, and it's hard for you to know what it's like to not know what you know, because you know so much. So keep those in mind.
There is a downside too to having too much domain sector knowledge around the table as well. So it is a balance. I have seen there has been obviously examples of high-profile failed companies where there hasn't been any sector knowledge around the table. There's also been those where it's been full of sector knowledge, and I use construction as often a sector where I see that like attracts like, and you get everyone around that table that's either been on property or construction or building, etc., and they are quite siloed in thinking, in their thinking, and that's when things that the ability to look at what's happening and align sectors and bring new thinking or look at things through different lens isn't able to be undertaken. So it's all about balance. So what I'm saying there is that when you're looking at making your next board appointment, making sure that matrix or whatever mechanism you use there allows a balance. And one of those key points of balance is, do we have enough sector knowledge around the table, or would actually a lack of sector knowledge be an advantage in this new appointment?
Definitely. Good points.
Okay, this is another long one. Sorry, team. Our board is appointed by an external authority for a 5-year term. The chair or board tries to influence the external authority but has no real capacity to engage an effective CEO. It's basically a hit and miss for us. The board is highly effective, engaged, and excellent communicators. What are your suggestions on how to influence the initial choice?
I'm a little confused by this one, actually, because they're saying the board is appointed by an external authority, but then they're saying that they have very little ability to influence and no real capacity to engage an effective CEO. So are they talking about appointing a CEO or appointing the board? Because it would be unusual for the board not to appoint the chief executive, but it is not unusual for an external authority to engage the board.
Well, someone has
I've been in that.
Someone has to engage the board, doesn't it? It has to be some external thing.
So, but normally the board would be involved, like the chair would be involved in appointing other board members. I've been in a situation myself where, as chair, I had very little influence over who was appointed to my board. And you get that in public sector and local authority boards. And all you can do is really try to find a place in the overall recruitment process where you can influence. And that is usually, in my view, at the long listing stage. You have a little bit of a hook maybe to actually, because it's not final decisions, it's just, at the long listing stage, it hasn't even got to shortlisting. So, early in the process, you're more likely to be able to get yourself into the process than later. I'm sure, Simon, you must deal with this all the time.
Yeah, I can't say too much more than that. It's hard to know whether it was the CEO or the or the board there. I think the constitution of the appointment panel is really important. If you can get some independence on there, you can get that well represented. I've always felt with the appointment panel is getting alignment right up front about what we are looking for. If everyone goes in there with their own views and then it comes down to selecting an individual and you're doing that after all the interviews are happening, very, very difficult. if you've clearly agreed and you close the gate saying we are looking for this, these are the competencies, these are the skills, these are the characteristics we are looking for, this is the demographic diversity, and everyone agrees with that, at least you can go back during deliberations to say, hang on, I'll just pull out the notes that we take, how are we measuring against that? And then it makes it a more objective exercise as opposed to possibly being coloured by subjectivity at that stage.
Right. Last question, team. Is it okay if the CEO does not attend board meetings?
No.
Definitely not.
Unless some sort of extenuating circumstance is a one-off, but no.
I'm interested in a question that was raised this morning in a webinar we had, and that is around apologies. So directors' apologies to meeting. In what instance would an apology be accepted?
From a CEO?
No, from a board member, say, or actually a CEO as well.
At any time. Unless it's like the 6th time in a row, we may start to have some issues.
The answer that Stephen Bowman had was that they need to respond in the affirmative that they have read the board pack and they have, here are my questions, or I have no questions to raise. Then they can be apologised for the meeting. So I thought it was quite interesting.
Yeah, I normally think of apologies as, something's health-wise, it's pretty rare, to be honest. Or they've taken leave of absence because international travel has precluded them from attending that one particular board meeting. I don't ever think, it's almost like there was something a little bit untoward in the question, like did they just apologise because they just didn't want to confront an issue, or they didn't want to be there, which is slightly different from a normal apology just being a matter of course of life that sometimes you can't make board meetings.
Well, that brings us to the end of our session, team. So Linda Carroll, Simon Telfer, Lisa Cook, thank you very much for your time this afternoon and commentary.
Yeah.
And
Pleasure.
we'll see you next time.
Ka kite anō.
Yeah, ka kite. Mā te wā.